Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into the world of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI.
Right, the MBTI, big topic.
Definitely. We've got a really interesting collection of sources here. They unpack what it is, clear up some, well, common misunderstandings.
Which there are plenty of.
Oh, yeah. And they look at how it's used, and even some research linking it to self-awareness. So, our mission today, give you the core insights, a shortcut, really, to understanding this framework without getting totally bogged down.
Good plan, because at its heart, the MBTI is basically a way to apply Carl Jung's theories about psychological types.
Jung, right?
Yeah. He suggested we have these sort of natural preferences, how we focus our energy, take in information, make decisions, and how we generally deal with the outside world.
Okay, like 4 different scales.
Exactly. 4 scales, each with 2 opposite preferences. Think extroversion or introversion, sensing or intuition,
Thinking or feeling.
and judging or perceiving.
Yeah. Okay, so let's unpack that. But first, a really key point, and this came through loud and clear in the sources, it's about preferences. It's not like a test that definitively says, this is who you are.
Absolutely crucial. It's what you prefer based on how you answer the questions. It doesn't capture your whole personality.
Because we're way more complex than that.
Way more. I mean, think about your goals, your values, intelligence, culture, how you were raised. All that stuff shapes us. The MBTI doesn't really measure those things.
So what is its aim then?
It's more about boosting self-awareness, improving communication, understanding how you and others tick, maybe.
Okay. I like the analogy one source used, like being right-handed or left-handed.
That's a good one.
You prefer one hand, maybe strongly, but you still use the other one all the time. And neither is better, just different.
Precisely. No preference is inherently superior. So let's dig into those 4 dimensions. First one, extroversion, E, versus introversion, I.
Yeah.
This is about energy.
Yeah, where you direct it, where you get it from.
So extroverts tend to look outwards. They get energized by, interacting with people, doing things in the external world, often sociable, action-oriented.
They think by talking things through sometimes.
Often, yeah, processing out loud.
Okay. And introverts, the flip side.
Introverts tend to focus their energy inward, on their own thoughts, ideas, memories, experiences. They find afflection energizing.
So they need solitude to recharge.
Pretty much. They often prefer deeper interactions, maybe one-on-one, and definitely need that quiet time after a lot of social stuff. It's not necessarily about shyness.
Right, it's about where you top up your battery.
You're okay.
Okay, next pair. Sensing S versus intuition N. This is about how we absorb information.
Exactly. How you prefer to take stuff in. Sensing types tend to rely on concrete information, things they can see, hear, touch, perceive directly through their senses.
So facts, details, what's happening right now. Practical stuff.
Very much so. They often focus on the present, maybe draw on past experience, very grounded in reality.
And intuitive types. N, not I, because I is for introversion.
Right. N for intuition. They're more attuned to, the connections between things, patterns, possibilities, future implications.
The big picture.
Yeah, the big picture. They look for overarching themes, impressions, maybe read between the lines, often more interested in theories, abstract ideas, what could be.
Like seeing the forest, not just the individual trees.
That's a classic way to put it, yeah.
Okay. Third dimension. Thinking T versus feeling F. How we make decisions. This feels like a big one for differences in approach.
Oh, it definitely can be. Thinking types prioritize logic, objective analysis when they make decisions.
Striving for impartiality, consistency.
Exactly. They focus on the facts, the cause and effect, often quite direct, focused on the results.
Kind of a head-first approach. And feeling types.
Feeling types make decisions based more on their personal values and, crucially, how those decisions will impact other people.
So empathy is key. Harmony.
Very much so. They consider the human element, the circumstances, what feels right based on their values, and the potential effect on relationships.
Got it. Okay, last pair. Judging J versus perceiving P. How we like to live in the outer world. This one always felt a little less intuitive to me initially.
Yeah, the names can be a bit misleading. Judging doesn't mean judgmental. It's more about preferring structure, order.
Liking things decided. Planned.
Pretty much. Judging types tend to be organized. They like schedules, making decisions, and moving on. They enjoy closure, knowing things are settled.
Okay, like having things neat, tied up.
And
Perceiving.
perceiving types are more comfortable with flexibility, spontaneity. They like to keep their options open, gather more information.
Adapter.
Very adaptable. They're comfortable improvising, changing plans. They might find deadlines more restricting and prefer a more emergent approach. Less about deciding quickly, more about staying open.
So one likes the map, the other likes exploring the territory as they find it.
That's a nice way to think about it, yeah.
Okay, so you combine one preference from each of these 4 pairs.
And you get the 16 distinct personality types, each with its 4-letter code, like ISTJ or ENFP, as you mentioned.
The inspector or the champion. Just labels, but kind of a shorthand.
Exactly. A shorthand for a common cluster of tendencies and how people might think or act.
Okay, foundational understanding. Check. Now let's talk about implications. Key takeaways. Relationships seem like a big area where this pops up.
Definitely. Understanding these preferences can be really, really helpful in relationships. Think about couples therapy, for instance.
How so?
Well, realizing one partner is an extrovert who needs social time to recharge, while the other is an introvert needing quiet space. That insight alone can prevent so many misunderstandings.
Ah, yeah. Stop seeing it as rejection or neediness maybe, and more just different wiring.
Exactly. Different needs, different communication styles.
Mhm.
Knowing that can build empathy.
Makes total sense. And the outline mentioned applying this to parenting too, like understanding your kids' types.
Yeah, that can be incredibly insightful. Think about that EI energy difference again. An introverted child might just get completely overwhelmed by a big party or a noisy classroom much faster than an extroverted sibling.
So you can adjust expectations or the environment.
Right. Or think about S versus N. An intuitive child might need the why, the big picture, before they engage with details. A sensing child might need clear, concrete steps.
So you tailor how you explain things, how you teach them.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It helps you meet them where they are, understand their natural learning style or needs.
Really practical.
Oh.
Okay, let's pivot to some common misconceptions.
Yeah,
Because the MBTI gets, well, it gets a lot of criticism too.
it certainly does.
So first big one we already touched on.
Yeah.
It tells you who you are. We need to hammer this home.
Absolutely. Let's reiterate. It shows preferences based on your self-report. It doesn't define your whole being. It's a starting point for reflection, not a box.
You're still you, with all your unique experiences, values, skills.
All of that. The MBTI is just one lens.
Okay. And what about that Jung quote? No such thing as a pure extrovert or introvert. He apparently said they'd be in a lunatic asylum. That sounds harsh.
It does sound harsh out of context, but Jung was really talking about extremes. He believed healthy psychological functioning required balance, engaging with both the outer and inner worlds.
Ah, so a pure type would be someone completely cut off from one of those.
Exactly. Someone only living externally, ignoring their inner life, or someone completely lost in their inner world, detached from reality. He wasn't saying having a preference for introversion or extroversion is unhealthy, just that complete imbalance would be.
That makes much more sense. It's
Right.
about balance, not denying that preferences exist.
Right. His other quote about every individual is an exception to the rule also highlights that people are complex, even within a type.
Okay. Then there's this term ambivert. People say, oh, I'm not E, or I am an ambivert. How does that fit? Or does it?
That's actually a concept usually associated with a different model, the Big Five personality traits.
Okay. Not MBTI.
Not MBTI. The Big Five measures traits like extroversion on a continuous scale. An ambivert would be someone scoring somewhere in the middle. The MBTI uses a different approach. It sorts you based on which preference you lean towards, E or I.
So it's like MBTI asks, which do you prefer? And Big Five asks, how much of this trait do you have?
Kind of, yeah. Different tools, different theoretical underpinnings. MBTI is about your preferred operating system in a way.
Gotcha. Okay, another big one. Psychologists don't use the MBTI, or it's not scientifically valid. What's the reality there?
Well, it's complicated. Some academic psychologists might be critical, especially if it's used for purposes it wasn't designed for. Like one source mentioned a researcher saying it wasn't suitable for his specific study on changing type A behavior.
Because it doesn't measure type A behavior.
Exactly. It wasn't the right tool for that job. Also, a lot of the criticism about, say, retest reliability often refers to much older versions of the MBTI.
Like Form G.
Yeah, forms from decades ago. The current versions, like the MBTI Global Step I, have undergone a lot more development and show much better psychometric properties, including reliability.
So the tool itself has evolved.
Significantly. And while some academics might prefer other models for certain kinds of research, the MBTI is widely used in applied settings. Team building, leadership development, coaching.
For self-awareness and understanding team dynamics.
Precisely. It has its place when used appropriately, which leads to another point, predicting job success.
Right. People try to use it for hiring or saying, this type is good for this job. Does that hold up?
No, not really. The MBTI organization itself is very clear about this. It's not designed to predict job performance or success.
Why not?
Because success depends on so much more. Skills, experience, motivation, the specific job demands, the work environment. Personality preference is just one small piece of a huge puzzle. Using it for selection is generally considered a misuse.
Good to clarify. It's about understanding, not predicting performance.
Okay, let's shift to that self-awareness link. The research you mentioned sounded pretty interesting.
It really was. There seems to be a clear connection between understanding your personality type, maybe through the MBTI, and developing self-awareness.
And the research looked at how people develop self-awareness.
Yes, and what they found most effective. The methods people used most often were things like getting feedback from peers, filling out questionnaires like the MBTI, feedback from family, feedback from managers.
Some usual suspects, maybe.
Kind of. But interestingly, the methods rated as most effective weren't always the most frequently used.
Oh, what were they?
Things like training to become a coach, receiving professional coaching yourself, and yes, personality questionnaires were also rated highly effective.
Huh. So peer feedback is common, but maybe less impactful than targeted coaching or deep dives into personality frameworks.
That's what this particular research suggested, yeah. A bit of a disconnect between common practice and perceived effectiveness. Fascinating. Did the research talk about the pros and cons of being more self-aware?
It did. Generally, more advantages were reported than disadvantages.
Like what?
People felt better, able to capitalize on their strengths, improve leadership, feel more confident at work, and personally, make better decisions. Stuff like that.
This is pretty good.
Yeah.
Any downsides mentioned?
The main ones were a tendency towards overthinking or getting stuck in rumination.
The paralysis by analysis trap, maybe.
Could be part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Knowing yourself deeply is powerful, but you have to manage that knowledge constructively.
Right. And did they find links between specific MBTI preferences and aspects of self-awareness?
Yes, this was quite nuanced. For instance, introversion was linked with higher reflection, which makes sense given the inward focus.
Okay.
Extroversion, maybe surprisingly, correlated with higher insight and higher rumination.
Both. Interesting.
Yeah. Thinking types also showed higher rumination, while perceiving types tended to report lower mindfulness.
Wow. So our underlying preferences might actually shape how we are self-aware or what aspects of it come more naturally.
That's what these correlations suggest. It's not just that we are self-aware, but the flavor of it might differ.
Really interesting. Okay, let's make this concrete. The outline had an example for ENFP. How does knowing that type inform behavior, especially under stress?
Okay, so for an ENFP, their favorite or dominant process is typically extroverted intuition. That's about seeing possibilities, connections, generating ideas outwardly.
The champion seeing potential everywhere.
Right. Their second or auxiliary process is introverted feeling, phi, used inwardly to check things against their values, what really matters to them personally.
Okay, so nake out, phi in. What about the left preferred ones?
Those would be introverted sensing, psi, and extroverted thinking, teal. Now, under stress, an ENFP might overuse that dominant knee jumping between too many ideas, getting scattered.
Losing focus.
Yeah. And then their less preferred sensing function might kick in, but maybe in a negative way, becoming fixated on inconvenient facts or past mistakes, getting really critical or worried about detail.
The inferior function grip.
That's the idea. So knowing this, how do they regain balance? Strategies might include consciously taking breaks, grounding themselves, maybe recalling past successes using that introverted sensing, or using their thinking function to objectively weigh pros and cons instead of just focusing on negative possibilities.
So understanding the type dynamics gives you clues for self-management.
Exactly. It provides a map for understanding your own patterns, especially under pressure.
So summing up the benefits then, what does MBTI awareness really give you?
Well, it can really deepen your understanding of your own typical reactions, why you do what you do. It helps you identify and leverage your natural strength.
And maybe understand the areas you find more draining.
Yes, those less preferred functions. It helps you appreciate why some tasks take more energy. And interestingly, some sources suggest that later in life, maybe midlife, people often start developing and finding more satisfaction in those less preferred areas.
Kind of rounding yourself out.
In a way, yeah, integrating different parts of yourself.
That's a hopeful thought. And you mentioned the MBTI Step 2 gives even more detail, facets.
Right. Step 2 breaks down each of the 4 preference pairs into 5 specific facets. So instead of just extrovert, it looks at facets like initiating, expressive, gregarious, active, enthusiastic.
Ah, so two extroverts could look quite different depending on their facet results.
Exactly. It gives a much more nuanced picture of how you express your type. It helps explain within type differences and can be really useful for figuring out how to adapt when a situation calls for something that doesn't come as naturally.
More personalized insights. Okay, wow, we have covered a lot. Let's try and wrap this up with the core takeaways.
Okay, so bottom line. The MBTI is a tool for understanding preferences, not locking you in a box. Its main value lies in boosting self-awareness and improving communication.
Right, and we cleared up some myths. It's distinct from models like the Big Five. The pure type idea is about unhealthy extremes, and its validity depends on using the current versions appropriately, not for predicting job success.
Exactly. And we saw there's research connecting type to self-awareness, how different preferences might relate to reflection, insight, even rumination, and how understanding your type, maybe through coaching or questionnaires, seems effective for developing that awareness.
And that self-awareness itself seems a link to real benefits like confidence and leadership, even if there's a potential pitfall of overthinking. So hopefully this deep dive has been that shortcut we promised. A way to grasp the essence of the MBTI, its potential uses, its limitations, and why understanding your preferences and others can be genuinely useful.
Yeah, that recognition piece is key. Better communication, stronger relationships, just understanding yourself a bit better.
Definitely. And that idea that self-awareness can lead to tangible improvements. That's powerful stuff.
It really is. Which brings us to maybe a final thought to leave you with.
Go for it.
Well, thinking about that research, finding that the most common ways people try to develop self-awareness aren't always seen as the most effective ones.
Right, the feedback versus coaching questionnaire gap.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, what other areas of life are we maybe just doing things out of habit, using the common approach, rather than the potentially more optimal one? Perhaps exploring different ways of self-reflection or even seeking out that professional coaching could unlock insights we haven't accessed yet. Food for thought.